Mullah Nasruddin was on one of his many pilgrimages, and he found himself in the teeming metropolis of Bukhara. But he started to get into a state of panic because he thought to himself, where am I going to find myself amongst all of this throng? So, exhausting himself, and it coming to dusk time, he went to find himself a caravanserai to spend the night, like an inn. And in these caravanserais, they're like dormitories. Everyone's assigned a pallet. So Mullah Nasruddin was assigned his pallet, and he lay down and he tossed and he turned and tossed and he turned. So he was keeping awake the traveller who was in the pallet next door to him. So finally the traveller said, what is it that's troubling you? And the Mullah Nasruddin said, I can't go to sleep. I'm so terrified that when I wake up in the morning I won't be able to find myself. So the traveller said, don't worry, look, take this bladder and attach it to your toe. And when you wake up in the morning, when you see it, you'll know it's you. Oh, with great relief, the Mullah took the balloon and blew it up and attached it to his big door and lay down and went to sleep, a blissful sleep. But the traveller was a bit of a trickster. And when the Mullah was asleep, he took the balloon off the Mullah's toe and he put it on his own. And then he lay down and went to sleep. Well, the Mullah woke up in the morning and looked around quickly, saw the balloon, went over and woke him up and said, oh, I can see that you are me. But if you're me, then who in Allah's name am I? The state of the nation, Over these last days, we've been exploring the nature of emptiness, as we said on Sunday, and not the essence of emptiness, because we can only find the essence of something, and emptiness is not something. So we're trying to find the nature of emptiness. But if we look up in the dictionary, nature, the word nature, has many meanings, many nuances and many subtleties. So we have to be clear about what it is that we mean by the word nature, the nature of emptiness. What does it really mean? So, remind you of that story of King Solomon. Now, King Solomon, we know, was up there with the gods because he had great powers, He knew the language of the birds and the animals. He could fly on a magic carpet to wherever he went. So he was up there with the gods. And we also know that the Queen of Sheba herself was also almost of goddess status. So one day the Queen of Sheba decided that she would go to King Solomon's court just to check out whether he was the illustrious being that he was said to be. So, of course, this was known by King Solomon, so his palace was polished within an nth degree. And the Queen of Sheba duly arrived with a large entourage of singers and dancers, which absolutely beguiled King Solomon. But not only was he beguiled by the wonderful music and dance of the beings who accompanied the Queen of Sheba, but he was also just spellbound by her astonishing beauty. Well, when they met and exchanged pleasantries, and the Queen of Sheba gave King Solomon gifts which indicated her own illustrious status. We can call her what we like, but it's certainly having the powers of the goddesses. And the gifts denoted this to King Solomon. But then the Queen of Sheba said to King Solomon, "No, it is hoped that you won't mind if I test your abilities, your perspicacity, by giving you 3 riddles." Of course, King Solomon had to agree to this. Well, the first 2 riddles, which have been related at another time, King Solomon answered very specifically, to the great satisfaction of not only the Queen of Sheba, but all of those who were present at the court at that time. But then the Queen of Sheba clapped her hands, and in came 2 bearers, and each of those bearers was carrying a large vase of the most magnificent roses one could ever imagine, and placed them in front of King Solomon. Now the Queen of Sheba said to King Solomon, "One of these urns of roses is created by nature. The other urn of roses is created by the abilities of man. Tell me, great and illustrious king, which is the urn of real roses?" Now, of course, King Solomon knew that his abilities, his perspicacity, were really being tested by this. So, putting himself in a state of intense concentration, contemplation, he contemplated each of the bowls of roses, and he looked carefully. He could see no differences at all. And then he spied on one of the roses a drop of moisture. And he thought, but then when he looked at the other bowl, there, on the same rose, was the same drop. He could not perceive the difference. But then, just then, a bee flew in the window, and a courtier got up to shoo it out. But Solomon stopped him. "Wait," he said, because King Solomon knew nature. And as everyone observed, the bee flew directly to a rose and began to drink the nectar. King Solomon pointed to the vase, which of course contained the real roses. Both the Queen of Sheba and King Solomon nodded at one another with complete understanding. They knew that the nature of nature is that nature knows the real. So when we look, and using this phrase, to endeavor to understand the nature of emptiness, what do we really mean? Before we can come to an understanding of what emptiness is, we need to know what the nature of life, in fact, all things, and other than things, means. What do we mean when we say we seek the nature. If you will, look up this word nature. Look at the meanings that are presented. Look at the subtleties and the nuances which bring them together as this word nature. And just as a clue, but it really doesn't help us a great deal at all, because then it gives us another endeavour. We could equally say we're seeking the Tao of emptiness. But the Tao is something else to our understanding, isn't it? When we hear the Tao, it's mystical. It's kind of out there. The Tao that can be known is not the Tao, etc., etc., all of those sayings. So to bring it down to the nature, it's something that we can get a grip on. So rather than say we seek the Tao of emptiness, to say we seek the nature of emptiness allows us to explore and embrace something that is tangible and yet intangible, expressible and inexpressible, and bring us to an understanding of what emptiness is. Thank you. You sound a bit like a teacher, didn't you? Don't mean to be, of course.